come in. Oh, hi, good to see you again. I'm just, this is the shelf, or this one particularly, where I have lots of my Arthuriana, as part of just my love of Arthuriana, but also the reading and preparation for my long poem that I've embarked on, which I've read bits of to you, Merlin's Isle, an Arthuriad, which I'm happy to say Rabbit Room Press are going to publish. But these books have spilled, as it were, down into a great pile here on top of my great-grandfather's old Victorian writing desk there. And there's a new edition, a book I not only didn't have but didn't know about, although I knew some of the things that it's about. The Flowering Hawthorn by Hugh Williamson, but it's got these wonderful engraving illustrations. It was sent to me by the artist, the Northern Irish artist Mark Shields, who's happily become a friend. Do have a seat. So I thought I'd show you this. It's a really compelling book. In fact, I read it at a single sitting. On the cover here, this figure is Joseph of Arimathea. And this book retells really the whole, I mean, with some historical detail, the whole sort of part of the legend of Glastonbury, which is to do with the idea that Joseph of Arimathea, fleeing persecution, came with the holy relics, with the Holy Grail and the Spear of Longinus, at Jesus' own instruction, as it were, to England. He'd been a Phoenician merchant trading in the tin trade, and there was indeed a trade between the Levant and Cornwall back in the day, back in the same days as Christ, because of the seas being opened, as it were, by the Roman Empire. And the story which you see illustrated here is that he was told he would be given a sign at the place that he should stop and build what became, in this legend, the first Christian church in Britain. He would be given a sign, and the sign turned out to be that when he planted his staff in the ground, just to rest for a minute at the top of a hill, which is called Weariall Hill to this day, it flowered suddenly and miraculously and became a flowering hawthorn. And the special characteristic of this hawthorn was that it not only flowered as you would expect it to in the spring, but that it flowered on Christmas Eve. It flowered, as it were, on the night of Christ's birth. And so the book, which is very beautifully produced and has these lovely sort of illustrated capitals, opens kind of with a kind of amazing irony, an account which is genuinely historical of how somebody sent a blossom, a Christmas blossom, from the thorn to, of all people, Thomas Cromwell, with the aim that they should give it to Henry, he should give it to Henry VIII as a gift from the Abbey at Glastonbury, because the tree had always been associated, because of its Arthurian associations, with kind of sacral kingship in England. Ironically, of course, Cromwell was just getting ready to do the complete depredation of the abbey at Glastonbury as part of the dissolution of the monasteries. But he was sent these two flowers wrapped in black and white sarsta. Anyway, the book goes on to say, history does not relate whether Cromwell took the hawthorn to the king, who was more concerned with preparations to destroy the abbey of Glastonbury and take for himself its more durable properties, than with the holy thorn, which grew there on, quote, the holiest earth in England. But there is no doubt that he knew of the giant tree with the double trunk, which had stood on Weariall Hill from time immemorial, and would always blossom at Christmas, mindful of our Lord, for it was part of the tradition of England. A poem of the Middle Ages referred to hawthorns also that groweth in Wirral, Wirral being a contraction of Weariall, do burge and bear green leaves at Christmas, as fresh as other in May. And only 13 years before the gift of the hawthorn to Cromwell, Blossoms Inn off Cheapside, whose sign was the white blossom of the Glastonbury thorn, had been commandeered by the king to house the retinue of a visiting monarch. So And then it just goes on to say the hawthorn blooms still, and in 1929 it was linked again with royalty when King George V accepted the gift of some Christmas flowers, which in like manner have been offered to his successors. Now, it only flowers because it was saved by slips of the tree being taken, because so deeply did even the Puritans, in attacking it, this is later in the 17th century, feel this deep sacral link about kingship and holiness and the birth of Christ and all these things, and the relics from that Joseph of Arimathea brought, that on the same day that they beheaded Charles I, they sent somebody to hack down the Glastonbury Thorn. And but of course, while they were doing it, everybody was coming and gathering the slips and planting them. And I have indeed myself been involved in a little ceremony called balming the tree of a slip of the Glastonbury Thorn that grows in Cambridge. I sang my song, The Green Man. I'll just show you the end of this book as well, which is, and the flowering hawthorn, though the original thorn has gone, and the slab may have something of the appearance of a tombstone, many thorns have budded from the parent stem. At Glastonbury, one can be seen in the abbey grounds. There is a better one in the churchyard of the parish church, on whose altar blossoms are put every Christmastide, and a better one still in the vicarage garden. The fact that it blossoms twice is a genuine thing. I mean, there's lots and lots of attestation to it. And somebody did actually do a botanical study of it. And obviously hawthorns are native to England, but they're also native to the Holy Land. And the particular type of hawthorn that this is in fact the one that comes from the Holy Land. I mean, how that is, one doesn't know, but there you are. And that's one of the reasons why it blossoms twice. So then comes, as it were, the great peroration of the book. The destroyers did not destroy, and though far away in the western shires, the sentence is Chesterton's, they cut down the thorn of Glastonbury, from which had grown the whole story of Britain. That's just brilliant. The thorn of Glastonbury, from which had grown the whole story of Britain. It did not cease to flower any more than the story of Britain ceased to unfold. And as from the ruins of the holiest earth in England, botanists took the thorn to other parts of the country, and Bristol traders to other parts of the world, so it became a pilgrim witness to its past, to the unexampled splendour of the Abbey, which was the second Rome, and to the learning of the Middle Ages, to the statesmen Dunstan and Henry de Blois, who forged a state from antagonistic elements, and to the great soldiers who saved faith and order from engulfing chaos and made themselves legends forever, Alfred and Arthur, to the saints who are still the patrons of Ireland and Wales, Patrick and David, and to the first founder who came from Arimathea to the Isle of Avalon, where immemorially the shades of a strange religion darkened the hilltop. That's a reference to the idea, which I don't think of it as darkened, that before the coming of Joseph, there was something about Glastonbury that was already sensed to be very numinous, and it was believed in pre-Christian times to be a fairy fort, as it were, to be where the fays lived. And that's something that comes quite strongly into my poem. And in the end, it came, it says, to a tree on another hill outside the gates of Jerusalem, which is, of course, the tree from which all of it springs. Anyway, it's a beautiful book. It's beautifully produced. And this is a thing of somebody, the first person trying to desecrate the thorn is blinded by a splinter from it and then healed when he goes to pray in the church. And as I say, there are many beautiful in woodcut engravings in this book. So I was delighted to receive this as a gift from Mark, and it was very timely. I had already got a little bit about about hawthorns in my Grail cycle part of the story. But I ended up writing a little bit more. I ended up going back to the text and amending it just to make the Glastonbury connection clearer. And I've just written now, sort of going back in the story, about Arthur's nurture, a scene in which he comes, as it were, not to the outward and visible Glastonbury, but to the inner and spiritual Avalon, which is, as it were, to which it is a kind of portal. And he, in that elven realm, he finds a thing called the Chapel of the Thorn, which is a phrase I borrowed from Charles Williamson. I have him facing some of his own shadows there and being delivered and having a vision of the Lady of the Lake. But the bard Taliesin tells him that the elven realm, as it were, the fairy in its deepest sense, and the outward and visible England or Britain or Ogres are interwoven, they're interleaved, as it were. At any point you can step from one into the other, and things that are in one affect things that are the other. So this Chapel of the Thorn in the elven realm is, as it were, simultaneously in the place where Joseph planted his staff, and it became the Thorn of Glastonbury. So I love the image, those words of Chesterton's about, what is it, the exact phrase was, about the tree, which was, as it were, itself the history of Britain. Let's just see if we can find that again. The thorn of Glastonbury, says Chesterton, from which had grown the whole story of Britain. And the idea of a story growing like the thorn is something that's very congenial to Tolkien. He talked about the tree of tales and about each of us, as it were, finding the branch of the story that we are part of. And as he has this beautiful image of, as it were, of unfurling a few more leaves on the tree, being rooted still in the tradition from which it comes. And that's a very good way for me to think about what my whole Arthuriad is really about, that it's part of the stock and stem of a great tree of tales. But this particular tale, the coming of Joseph and the whole coming of Arthur and then of Galahad and the achievement of the Grail, is really the prime myth, I think. It's the great story that's been given to us in these islands. It is the primary kind of mythos of Britain, and therefore I think a worthy subject of poetry in every generation. And every generation unfolds or unleafs, as it were, another little bit of it. But in the end, we're doing something which is rooted right in the deepest parts of our history. And it's very much about how the coming of the Hallows, the coming of these holy things, actually gives meaning, renews, fulfills some of the ancient things that were already there. It rebukes some, but it brings others, literally, like the staff of Joseph, to a kind of new flowering. And I'm going to try and achieve a little bit of, or something like that, a kind of new flowering, I hope, of this very ancient tale in my own writing. So wish me well with that, and perhaps another time when you drop round I'll read you some of the new stuff, and you can see what I'm doing with it. Anyway, thanks for calling round. Cheers.